So we have tremendous wealth, the richest nation in the history of humanity, the richest state and the fifth largest economy of the world. And yet we don't want to tax billionaires. California's home to half of America's billionaires or millionaires in the same manner we did in the past. We don't want them to pay their fair share. And so when people are upset because they don't have health care, they have to go to the emergency room, when their schools are overcrowded, when they're sitting on freeways listening to AM radio, who do they blame? Well, who do political leaders tell them to blame? They tell them to blame immigrants. Now look at the irony. Here we have California, home to half of America's billionaires, a quarter of America's millionaires. We have working men and women who come here because they love their families. They don't want to leave their country. They don't want to leave their home. They don't want to leave their state. But they love their families, and so they come here to work so they can take care of themselves here and be responsible and take care of their families where they came from. So you have these responsible people, hardworking, industrious, who would, given the opportunity, abide by all laws, and they're blamed for plant closures. They're blamed because we have crowded freeways because we're not building infrastructure. They're blamed because we don't invest in health care. And so the challenge that we have is that we have a political crisis, a moral and ethical crisis, because people, unlike this panel, unlike Dolores, who goes all over the country, unlike Chole, who's been doing this her whole life and past the length of our lives, unlike people who go out and tell the truth, we don't have political leaders who want to talk about this in the way that it is true. They look at the polls and they say it's not popular. And it's so absurd today. How absurd is this? On the question of whether or not immigrants should drive legally in this state, how absurd is this? That we are at a point today where we know that driving a vehicle is dangerous. That's why we don't let children do it. That's why you can't drink and drive. That's why you have to have a seatbelt, because it's dangerous. That's why if you aren't mature enough, or if you have some physical disability, you're limited, you can't drive. We know it's dangerous to drive a vehicle. And yet this has become so absurd that we don't want 10%, 1 out of every 10 persons on the road, to have a license, to be licensed, tested, and insured. How absurd is this? Is that, what is it, Monday will be the 5th anniversary of 9/11? Right? Now, out of the 9/11 Commission report, whether we agree with it or not, there was a consensus. 1 minute. Oh, this is easy. After the 9/11 report, there was a consensus in which every U.S. senator voted that we should have as an agreement on national security, know who lives here. A simple proposition. We should know who lives here. It's a scheme, a plan for national security. All the police chiefs of the nation support it. In California, the governor will not sign a driver's license bill, which is, right, let's boo him, which is essential for national security and highway safety. Why? Because immigrants may benefit from this. And forget the other 24 million motorists who are on the highway. So finally, let me just close by this. So there's an anti-immigrant hysteria. We recognize it. But the future is in our hands. It's not about a focus group. It's not about making us popular. I'm tired of people saying, well, if we just do this, if we just do that, make us look this way if they see this image. No, they are creating their images of us. We must create our images, but we must understand the power exists in our hands. The capacity to win elections is in our hands. We can beat Governor Schwarzenegger, we can elect a new Congress, but we have to work. That's what it's about. It's about organizing and doing the hard work. And in the spring, we were all blessed because this movement transcended us. This movement, we are all grabbing onto it. But we must understand that this movement has moved beyond us, and we must do the hard work of organizing and registering people. And yesterday when the reporter said, well, why haven't Latinos been registered? And why don't they vote? And I said, well, why don't Americans vote? Right? Americans don't vote. We send our men and women, young men and women, to fight a war to defend our democracy, and we don't vote for that very democracy. I was watching the Mexican elections. There personally, lines and lines of people. People are there voting, but here you can't even get people out. But for us, what does that mean? That if we organize voters, If we exercise our political will, if we exercise our political power, we can win these elections, we can win California, we can win the Congress, and we can transform. And we won't be begging for the best deal that we can get in Congress. We won't be begging for a driver's license. We will be able to exercise that. We will be able to realize that if we exercise our political power.